Okay, so we got to the weekend, and this was the Saturday, which was my day 4. Now, I made the decision on that day to start moving east because the weather was getting increasingly bad now in the Fort William area and to the west of it. And I made the decision to drive out on some of the smaller roads to the northeast of Fort William, that being the B8004 running into the B8005, which runs along Lockheed. Now, I made the decision that I was going to drive round onto the single track road which runs around Loch Arkaig, I think it's probably said. And that was a very good experience. The cloud was terrible and it was spitting with rain, but there was a brilliant washed up log, and that became a real focal point for me, which it was a very colourful bit of driftwood with a sort of almost colourless background, and I thought that worked really well. There was also other good landscapes to be had, including those perfect for black and white. With the dull weather, it was an ideal day for black and white, and this single tree against the mountainous backdrop really does work well, I think. Okay, into day 5, and with the weather increasingly getting worse in the west, I made the decision to drive out on the A86 towards the Cairngorms. Now, an area that I did want to catch was an area called Pattock Falls, where there's a series of waterfalls that really is worth a look. This is a sort of main one with the runoff that you can see from the road, but it's not very easy to access actually. So you've got to park over in the car park and wander around to get to a frontal view. And here's me talking about using polarizers.
Now, the thing is, when you take pictures of water, there's always this debate about whether you actually use a polarizer or not. Now, in this case, the water is very, very dark, and I want to pick up some of the highlights with the flowing water to make it look like the water is flowing. So in this case, I am not going to use a polarizer, because I don't think it needs it. The water is very dark, the sort of covering, and there's a lot of shade on the water, and I just don't think it needs it in this instance, because I want to get the movement of the water, and the water is something I want to pick up the highlights on anyway, as I've said. So I'm actually not going to run with a polarizer in this case. I'm on very low shutter speeds anyway. I'm on 2 seconds, just sort of f22, so a polarizer would just extend that too much anyway, so the shutter speeds would be too long with a polarizer on anyway, so I'm not going to use a polarizer in this instance.
Okay, here's a little bit of footage of me capturing my image. There was a lot of good colour about, and a lot of nice mossy scenes with evergreen leaf making some interesting tones and colour. Some of the interesting points is that there were other waterfalls in the vicinity, but coming up is a nice little clip of me getting very frustrated at what happens when a scene can be ruined by certain other growth.
The real flow, but there's right through the middle of it, and we can't avoid it. There's a sapling tree that, if you took that out, it would be an absolutely stunning composition. I have taken a couple of shots of it at the line because it's a really good run, but unfortunately it is one of those that's
Right, so going into my last 2 days, and what I did want to capture was some areas of Glencoe and Glen Etive. I don't know what it is about the place, but I get drawn to it all the time. There are things to be had in the area that aren't, always photographed by everybody, but there's a lot of photographers, both professional and amateur, that go there and take a lot of images from around the place. But it's just aiming to get there and maybe capturing something that may not always be captured by somebody. One of the problems that I had is that the weather was increasingly getting colder at this stage, and there was increasingly more snow forecast as these sort of couple of days went on. On the Monday, which was my 6th day, I had a little look round some of the areas, and we'll just go in to see where I went. Right, now I had a wander down the what I call the Clechaig Inn Road. It's a sort of a thin road that runs sort of through the top of Glencoe that you can access relatively easily from the Glencoe village. Runs down, has a beautiful view of the mountain Sgôr Fianad, and it really does look good. Now, I did manage to capture a good few images around that area, but in the late morning, conditions really did sort of turn bad. As you can see here, began to sleet very heavily and storm clouds building, and conditions really did deteriorate. Okay, so in the afternoon I was actually quite lucky because there were a few gaps in the storms that were coming through, and I ventured down the single track road, the Glen Etive Road, and there were some really good views and scenes to be had. This is Triple Falls, which I got a good number of shots from, and I explain here what's going on.
Right, Triple Falls done. Really good. The timing has been brilliant because there's just another storm, as you can see in the distance, just about to come through. So I've done that one just through. I've done all the way through. Didn't think I'd be able to get down there initially, but I took the risk and it's paid off. So I'm just going to pack up now and probably carry on down during the next storm.
Okay, so here's a couple of images that I captured that afternoon. This one of Triple Falls I thought worked very well in black and white, really showed up the contrast of the day and the deep dark clouds that were swirling around in between the storms, and I thought this picked up quite nicely in black and white. A colour view looking actually the other way, down towards the mountain in the distance, Stop Dube as it's known. And I thought this worked a bit better in colour, showed up some of the nice contrasting colours and greys and greens that there were about. Now I travelled on down, there wasn't too much more, the weather really closed in, and I think I captured really what I wanted to do, and I closed off at about 4 o'clock when getting dark. Okay, so into my final day, and day 7, yeah, the weather was very, very challenging. Snowstorms, very heavy snowstorms all the time. This is looking over Etive Moor from the car, just running down the single track road. Going on a bit further, I mean, there were images to be had, of course, with plenty of snow about. So I went ahead and captured a fair number of images along the way. Even with a four-wheel drive, I did get stuck on a couple of occasions as well. Going over the little tall fence stiles, this was an image that I captured, again looking over towards Stop Dube. I thought the colours, the green of that conifer really standing out against the white snowy backdrops of Stop Dube. Yeah, very effective. Now, the scenes, and you can see the storms building in the distance there. I mean, it really was some stunning scenery. The very dark clouds against the mountain there, Stop Dube, sticking out really fantastically. There really were a good number of images to be had. Very effective imagery. And plenty going on to really keep you interested and keep you on your toes during the whole trip. Okay, so at this point it was about 1:30 in the afternoon, although sometimes with the storm clouds that came over it seemed more like about night time, but I made the decision to carry on down, and I came out at Loch or U-double-R, depends on where you come from, I suppose, your pronunciation. Normally you can walk down and get a reflection of the opposing mountain in the loch, but it was very windy, and it certainly wasn't the day to do it. The loch was being blown about all over the place. Certainly wasn't a day to get any decent kind of reflection. So I may do with looking out towards the sort of west, towards Glen Etive, and the mountainous view that you can sort of see just coming up here in this video footage. There was quite a nice scene to be had there, and I made a capture that I thought that I would do while I was there, and I'm actually quite pleased with this image. A little bit of colour, but really captures the essence of that day. Very stormy, but you know, some bright snow in the image. Okay, so I did a UE at Loch and wended my way back. The conditions were getting really bad, but I was still able to get out and take a few images. There were some nice moments and leading line images to capture. And here's a sort of a bit of a video view of some of the mountainous scenes with the River Etive running along them, which you know, you could capture some really good shots all along here. And I tried in and out of the rain to do that. I mean, so there we are. I ended up back at the famous falls at River Corporal just as it was starting to get dark, really, because this was the end of my trip as such. You can see me here fumbling about, but the microphone work is just awful. Looking over Etive Moor, I got a good leading line with the image of the River Corporal. I then went back, strangely being the only photographer there at the famous waterfall just back. And you can see me here, and there's an image that I did capture. I was there all on my own, and I think that's what I'll remember about that image, is being able to capture an image at the famous waterfall, the River Corporal there, overlooking Etive Moor, and being completely and utterly on my own. It was a really strange experience. Of course, with the cold and the frozen river, there wasn't much of a waterfall, but that's the way the cookie crumbles, I'm afraid. So there we are. It was a really interesting trip. I think I achieved everything that I wanted to achieve, really. And that's always the aim of when you go on a trip, trying to at least get some of the photographs that you are hopeful of getting, and maybe exploring and finding different places that you may not have thought of before. And that's what I always like to try and do. I'll be going again at exactly the same time next year. And I'll hopefully again investigate some other areas that I've not been before, because there are all sorts of tracks and roads, and depending on the conditions you may be able to go for good long walks and hikes about to areas that you've never been. So there's always something to see, certainly in Scotland. But in the meantime, I hope you've enjoyed what you've seen today, and come back and subscribe to my channel, and we can hopefully have some good times together. Cheers.